would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Gundungurra land and people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you, our listeners, are joining us from today. I recognise the deep connection that First Nations people have to this land, their enduring culture, and their commitment to the preservation and care for their country. This land was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, the podcast where we explore the stories of people who have survived religious trauma, left high control or cult communities, and are deconstructing their faith. I'm your host, Sam, and each week I'll talk with individuals who have taken the brave step to start shifting their beliefs that might have once controlled and defined their lives. Join us as we dig into their experiences, the challenges they've faced, and the insights they've gained. Whether you're on a similar journey or you're just curious about these powerful stories, you're in the right place. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Gillie. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited for this episode. I am excited to have you here. I think anybody who knows me knows my little special interest in cults, and obviously like, it's nice and adjacent to religious trauma a lot of the time, and you see a lot of crossovers. So I'm really excited about this episode. But before we kick straight in, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Who are you and where in the world are you?
Well, hello. I am Gillie Jenkinson. I live in the middle of the UK in the Hope Valley in Derbyshire, and I'm currently watching the trees outside my window being blown around because
Yeah.
Storm Aylwin is on its way, and apparently it's a hurricane force storm in further north than us, but it's going to be pretty fierce here. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
And I live in a very beautiful area. And I have a little doggy. So
oh,
and I saw you have a doggy
I
and
do. I've kicked her out. I don't usually have her in for the podcast. She tends to sit at my window and just survey the street and bark. So it's not conducive for podcasting.
well, he's asleep under my desk,
Oh,
so I think he'll be just fine for the duration.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I've always found it really ironic because obviously, you work in cult recovery and you live in Hope Valley, and I think that that's just the most beautiful connotation and irony. I think that's great.
A cool name, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
I'm
beautiful.
a psychotherapist. That's my basic training. I actually did a diploma in pastoral counselling, so
Mm.
that was my part of my trajectory out of my own experience of cult and religious trauma and spiritual abuse. And then I did a master's in Gestalt psychotherapy, which became my kind of core model training, although it's an integrative model because we did object relations and looked at other kinds of theories. And then I did a PhD because I wanted to ask former cult members, what do you think helps former members recover? So I
Yeah.
didn't want it based on my story. I knew that would inform it, but I wanted it to hear what others had to say.
Yeah.
And then nearly 30 years of clinical work. So it all kind of gathers up together in what I do.
Yeah. If people have not picked up, we have a wonderful bonus episode on cults and cult recovery coming up. So that's what today is about. So before we get into some of the nitty-gritty questions that I want to ask, I think so many people there's a lot of definitions that float around about what is a cult and what defines a cult and all of that sort of thing. And so I just want to start by asking, how do you define what a cult is?
Yeah. So I mean, in my book, which maybe we can come to at some point, I actually use the definition from the International Cultic Studies Association, or ICSA, as I'll call them. and Robert J. Lifton, who devised the theory of brainwashing or thought reform. So I've kind of combined them because I think they're very potent. And I think the thing about a cult is it's exhibiting a great or excessive devotion to a person, an idea, or a thing. So, cult has this very narrow focus. Sometimes it's on the leader, the guru, but often, within a religious trauma type of cult, it's going to be on God. In other types of groups, it may be on a political ideology or a wellness kind of ideology. And then I think it uses a brainwashing or thought reform program to persuade, control, and socialize members. So thought reform is there are 8 components to thought reform, and it's like if you imagine a bicycle wheel and you're at the center. The 8 components of thought reform and those dynamics are what kind of hold somebody in captivity, psychological and often physical captivity. And I think that that's what kind of people kind of get swept into and they're not controlled by. I think there's always psychological dependency. It's like, you have a leader who says got the hotline to God, as they say. Sorry if it's triggering to people, but that's what people say.
Yeah.
Which is bollocks. And personally believe that's bollocks. And I think we all have to come to our own decisions. But that does really create a psychological dependency. And then there's an us and them mentality. We're in, you're out. We're the only church that counts. Any other church doesn't count. We're the only political organization that's, has the truth for the future. They always have the truth, the big T truth.
Yeah.
And there's psychological harm to members, families, the community, and children. And children are very key in all of this.
Yeah.
And I think children, the issue of being born into these systems is a very big one. And there's a whole big conversation about second and multi-generation and then first generation, which I am actually. I'm first generation. So that, is I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But,
yeah. And I mean, I think that's probably a good segue into my next question, which was what led you to work in this space? And now I obviously know that it's because you have your own cult experience and you've already alluded to that. But I wonder whether you can, for the listeners who maybe don't know that, what led you to this space?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Africa, in Uganda, where we were somewhat exposed to missionaries and sort of Bible, sort of kiddie Bible classes, and we would go to church sort of Christmas and Easter. We were nominal Christians. I'd never been anything other than Christian. I was always exposed to that kind of background. But when I was 18, I became a born again Christian through some coercion, I have to say. I mean, there was real pressure on me, and this person really kind of kept pushing, and I capitulated, unfortunately, for myself. And what's unfortunate is that I met some lovely people, and that wasn't unfortunate, but it ended up with me through various steps, joining a group in the Midlands of England that became a cult. So it wasn't a cult when I joined. It was a fellowship. So there were local people who were part of that fellowship, and I came from outside. I was born in Africa. I lived down south of England. I'd never been north in England. Like, it was alien to me because I used to travel back and forth. I went to school in the south of England, and so I came as quite an outsider, really, within that group, and with a very different experience to most of them. And very quickly they decided to set up in community. And this was in the 70s, where there was a very strong international move, certainly within the church and within other areas of society, into community. And I joined, long story short, very long story short, became a member of what was a fellowship, and then they decided to change it. And the leadership changed, and it became more and more controlling. So the sort of the Bible-based beliefs were weaponized. The Bible was weaponized. The idea of community was weaponized. That became part of the thing of exhibits great or excessive devotion to a person, idea, or thing. There was a devotion to their form of Christianity, that there was also a devotion to community. And that was like the thing, and you had to give the right impression on behalf of the community. And there was a lot of that going on. There was a lot of that going on in the churches worldwide, really was. And it became exceptionally abusive because we lived in community, and because there was no one overseeing us. The leadership ended up with physical beatings, and because of sin, and just really took it to the extreme.
Yeah.
But actually, I think, so that's something you can quantify as a terrible thing that happened. But actually, what was almost worse, because you can say, well, this is what they did to me.
Yeah.
But actually, the psychological manipulation and control, and the negative view of women, and sin and being sinful. And I'm sorry if this is triggering to people, but I think actually this is what we need to address, is that there's so much negativity in all of this. And we what I call introject, we swallow whole these ideas. I'm a terrible person. So when I left, I believed I was toxic. I was actually toxic. Yeah. That actually people would be harmed by me, because I'd introjected so much the ideas that they had, I didn't have a choice other than to believe them. And I couldn't leave, because I would go to hell. So I was trapped. I was truly psychologically trapped. But the community disbanded actually after about 8 years in 1981, I think it was. And that's been a great advantage for me, because doing this work, because I don't have the sort of shadow of a huge group there still existing. And it was very dramatic, the whole thing. It was traumatic and dramatic, the way it all kind of fell apart. But I left then, but I didn't leave. So I left the cult, but the cult didn't leave me at that point. I didn't deal with it. I ended up going to another church who said they understood about cults. So I thought I would have called it a cult, but I hadn't the first idea what a cult was. And actually, I don't think many people did back in the 70s.
I think some people still don't.
Oh, yeah, lots of people don't. But
yeah.
I mean, the theories that Ixa and others have developed, Janja Lalich, Dan Shaw, Alex Stein, people like that, who are really important writers and speakers in this field, they haven't, that wasn't fully formed back then. Yeah. So for another 14 years, I continued going to church. And, some were better than others. Some were fine. I had lovely friends. I made wonderful people. I honestly met some fantastic people, and they weren't cults, those places, but the cult was still in me. So I still lived in fear, terror, actually. Yeah. All the time living in fear of getting it wrong, doing the wrong thing, of being this terrible person. And am I going to harm people by just being myself? And not being myself, being a kind of lacking in confidence, and having a desire to do things, to create things, but not having the confidence to do it.
Yeah.
And it took me actually in the end leaving church altogether, getting some exit counselling. So talking to someone who understood about cults to help me start to make sense of it. And then deciding people would always come and start talking to me and telling me their life story, like on an aeroplane or something. You probably get the same.
Yes.
And I thought,
Yeah.
there's something here. People talk to me, maybe, and I did do some counselling in the church, and it seemed to go fairly well. I was very untrained, so I decided to train, but I was still too much in church to do a secular training. I couldn't do it, but my diploma in pastoral counselling was with some very good people who were Christians who really questioned things that I was saying, because we learned you do 3 hours counselling sessions in the church and you pray for people.
Thanks.
And they nearly fell off their chair when I said, oh, well, you have to, because I was quite what we call legalistic. Sorry, guys, that's going to be triggering as well.
Yeah.
Kind of, well, we have to do it for 3 hours, because that's what I've been told. And they were like, no, you do not do it for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And no, you do not pray for people in counselling. If they want to pray, they pray for themselves. You don't pray for them. And all of that was really good learning as I was exiting, still a very high control, mentality.
Yeah.
And and then I carried on and I finally did a Gestalt training, which is a secular training. And I'm glad I did, because I've used a lot of the ideas in my, what I've gone on to develop. So
Yeah.
I hope all that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. My initial counseling training was also with a Christian organization, and I remember having a lot of what I would probably describe as very heated conversations. They probably saw them as very combative, but they actually were just, passionate conversations where I was very much fiercely opposed to the teaching that we had to pray with our clients, that we had to use scripture with our clients. And I was like, I hate all of this. I hate all of it. It's not okay. It's not ethical. And so, but it sounds like that pastoral qualification was almost like a bridge between, like the bridge that you needed.
That's exactly. You put your finger right on it. It was the bridge I needed.
Yeah.
And when I did my I had to do, a dissertation at the end. It wasn't research. It was masters. It was 4 years. It was master's level, but it was a diploma. They hadn't got it kind of registered as a master's. So it wasn't a research paper, but I actually called it Bridge Over Troubled Water. What do pastoral counsellors and probably clergy or whatever need to know about cults and ex-cult members to be an effective helper? It's a very long title.
It is a very
But
long
it was
title.
very, very long title. But it was always my inquiry was always what's going to help, always. And then I did that same inquiry actually for my Gestalt. I interviewed 8 people for that and 29 people for the PhD.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a bridge out. It was, I think, to some of their, because I don't think they were wishing I would leave the church, but actually I had to. I'd had too much abuse. It was just too much. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
I remember one day saying to myself, you can't afford for this to ever happen again.
Yeah.
You've got to look after yourself and
Yeah.
you've got to do what's right for you.
Yeah.
And it's been fine. I haven't been to hell yet. In
No.
fact, I've gone to hell. And if I go to hell, I made the decision as well, and I'm not kidding. I actually said, if I go to hell, I'm sorry, but that's the decision I'm making,
Yeah.
because that's how it has to be, because
Yeah.
I can't carry on in this setting. I'm going to go mad. I literally was going to go mad.
I often, and most of my listeners will know this because I've probably said it many times before, which is that I often joke that if hell does exist, then all of the queer people are going to be there and it's going to be really fun at least. So like that's all right. It'll be stylish, it'll be fun, it'll be great. So we've got to have
Yeah,
you.
I'm up for that one.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious over all of the years that you've worked in this space, what do you find that people misunderstand the most about a cult? What do they always get wrong?
Well, I think lots of things.
Yeah.
I've got a list of things. I think I remember reflecting on this at the end of my PhD, is that there's this sort of myth about people who are in cults with black eyeline around them and hoods, and that actually it's so much more understandable and so much more down to earth.
Mm,
And there are a lot of myths about cults. I think it's also a myth that people join cults,
mm,
because you wouldn't join a cult. Like if you know that that group is going to abuse you, you are not going to join it.
mm.
You know, um, you're going to you're not joining a cult. You're joining something else. You're seeing something else there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
And I
does that
think,
answer?
yeah, yeah, I think it's actually a really good lead in because my next question, which was going to be around that, because you're right, people don't join cults. People are often in search of something, and more often than not, I've found that people are just in search of a place of belonging, and so they're joining spaces where they belong and they are seen. But other than belonging, what do you find that people who do land in cults are searching for?
There's people who are searching for spiritual connection. They're Christians who are looking for a good church.
Yeah.
They're you and me who are looking for a good therapist.
Mm.
Therapy has cults in it.
Yes, it does.
Or we're looking for a good yoga group,
Mm,
and not group, I mean, a yoga classes,
mm,
or whatever. And unfortunately, the one that they land in is happens to have another agenda.
yeah.
They're looking to be active politically, and they get, it's an animal. A cult is a thing. It's not a religion. It's not a this or that or the other. It's actually, if you think about the cult as a thing, and then it could be a this or this or this or this or that.
Yeah.
It's certain psychological dynamics which occur in society. I
Mm,
think some people are in the wrong place at the wrong time. I remember this extraordinary story about somebody years ago. This was back in the 70s, I think, who was traveling around America. It was an American thing. They were traveling, and gap year, whatever, they were just going around. They landed in some city, and that as they got off the bus, they were like, right, what now? And it was before the internet. Now we'd have Googled,
mm,
got a room and etc. But then they had to land in that city, go and see, where am I going to stay for tonight? And these lovely smiley people, yikes, always worry if they're
mm.
lovely smiley people offering you something. They
Yes.
offer a free meal. Yeah, there's no free meals, and a bed for the night.
Yeah.
And oh, in our lovely ski chalet up in the mountains. Oh, that sounds nice. Thanks, I'll come with you. 2 weeks later, they were full blown deployable agent member of a cult.
Yeah.
And where they were taken to was not a ski chalet in the mountains, it was a kind of chalet in the mountains where there were no buses, nothing. They couldn't get away. The people, they said the next day, can I go back to the city? Oh no, sorry, we don't have any cars going back to the city for another week or two.
Mm,
Playing the leaders, talks all day, every day, and then saying, well, you're here, we're offering you this, you need to do some work here. And they actually said that within 2 weeks they would have shot their parents if this group had told them to. And they became very phobic about Satan. Anyone going past was satanic, and sorry, another trigger word for people. But and that was a very sophisticated cult and very well known back in the 70s for being exceptionally good at recruiting. But you see very quickly there how somebody was tricked, scammed, and captured, and it took them a long time to get away.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point for people to remember that I think there is this automatic assumption when we hear the word cult that it's religious, but actually it's just not. Like, a family can be a cult, like a wellness retreat can turn into a cult. And I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions when I talk to people about cults is that they just assume that it's always religious or it's political, like it's the extremist terrorist type
Yeah,
cult.
yeah,
Um,
that.
and so, but I think it's bringing it back and going, actually, it can be far more insidious and far more almost subtle than
Or
those.
normal, looks
Yeah,
kind of normal.
yeah, yeah. I think, and also, I mean, like I said, I love a good cult documentary, like the
Yeah.
next person, but I think sometimes that doesn't help the narrative that, they don't all end up that extreme. They don't all end up as, the Netflix documentary. And so I think it's important for people to
I
remember.
mean that they say, there's probably a cult almost next door to you,
Yeah,
and that just like domestic abuse happens, you can't find the statistics on domestic abuse because people don't talk about it. They're not going to say, yes, my husband's beating me up and I'm in a coercive control relationship. And it's the same thing in a cult.
yeah,
You've got this other whole view. You're looking through a whole different lens at what's going on for you. So for me, back in the 80s, there was this, or 70, must be in the 70s, there was this doctrine that God wanted to break you. And that's been used then for years. And so even though I was being abused,
mm,
I had a whole rationale for why I would never, ever have called it abuse. It was me that was wrong
mm,
and I deserved it.
yeah,
And it's such a twist around that thought reform or brainwashing theory kind of creates this twist, and it twists the scriptures, it twists the Bible,
yeah,
it weaponizes the Bible in a way no book should ever be weaponized in that way.
yeah,
And so, all of those things are rationales for why these things are happening, and they're not seen to be what they are,
yeah,
and it's a big shock to face that it's a real shock. It's a shock.
yeah,
I remember I worked for a rape crisis centre for 11 years, and I remember a woman there saying facing that this was abuse was like those big American trucks,
mm,
like a truck hitting,
yeah,
turning round and coming back and hitting me again, and literally the physical reverberation of seeing that what you thought was one thing is suddenly actually something completely different,
yeah,
is a very big deal. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, obviously, core tenets of what makes cults so destructive is the emotional and the psychological manipulation and control that happens. And so I'm wondering if you can explain for people who don't necessarily understand how that, because I mean, just like we talk about with domestic abuse, it doesn't start out like that. So I'm wondering if you can talk about, I guess, how that tends to build over time, that it doesn't
Yeah.
start that way.
Yeah. Well, uh, I mean, given that you're going into something that is not a cult in your head, you
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
You're not going, oh, great, they're going to abuse me. You're going, oh, this feels hopeful and something refreshing,
Yeah.
possibly. So I think, first of all, what's going on in the background is masked. So
Mm.
it's there, but it's masked. And they talk about love bombing, love bombing, getting people into the group. Oh, we love you. I mean, if people start going on about loving you in 10 minutes of meeting you,
Brothers and
run,
sisters.
run for your life. Yes.
Yeah.
Brothers and sisters, those are trigger words as well, aren't
Mhm.
they?
Yeah.
Those language, it makes me feel sick now. I think, you're
Yeah.
not my brother and you're not my sister, unless you actually are.
Yeah.
I think, that the manipulation and control is masked by religiosity, spirituality, we're going to change the world, etc. And then, as I explained in my story, it gives the belief system gives the rationale for why they can manipulate you. Well, you're a bad person, you're sinful, so you need to learn from us, or you're impure and we need you to become pure in the way we think you should be pure.
Yeah.
And um, and then we introject and swallow those beliefs, and so it becomes an interactive process in the end, because we're tying in or buying in, and they're doing what they do. But in some of the teachings, some of my trainings, I sort of use the analogy of a steamroller, that the cult's a machine. It's often a sophisticated machine, however much they may or may not admit it, they're good at recruiting. If it's a recruiting cult, some cults don't recruit, some cults just breed, unfortunately. But so it's a kind of process. And I've used the analogy of the frog in boiling water, which is a horrible analogy. But if you heat a frog up from cold, it doesn't know it's being cooked alive, basically. But if you throw the frog into hot water, this is an analogy. Apparently, it's not exactly true, but you get the picture that
Yeah.
if you threw it in, it would leap back out. It would be like, whoa, this is burning me. But if you just heat something up, it doesn't really know that's actually happening.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me. Uh, uh, and I was young, I was 18, I was immature.
Mm.
Um, I think 18-year-olds these days maybe are much more streetwise, exposed to a lot more stuff with the internet and stuff. Whereas, I grew up in Africa and I came back and forth, which sort of dislocated me a bit from
Mm.
British culture. I'm a third culture kid. I was kind of in that mix of cultures.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I
Mm.
don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's okay. In terms of, I guess, we've mentioned a little bit that, there are cults that are not necessarily the ones that we see on the documentaries. They're not the ones that are making headlines or that we know about. There are family cults. There are work-based therapy cults, all of those sort of ones that people don't think about. And so, what are some, I guess, red flags? I don't really love the term red flags, but people tend to
I
know what
quite
we're
like
talking
it, actually.
about.
I think it's quite an expressive term,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. I guess I'm
Yeah.
just wondering whether you can speak to some things that I guess people can look out for. What are those red flags in terms of the smaller cults that are maybe not, Scientology and, Nexium and the ones that we see in all of the docos, the ones that are in your small rural community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're looking out for, this it's worth learning about thought reform and looking out for, what can you see is happening? Are people free to come and go? Are they able to socialize outside of the group? I'm just thinking of Gloria Vale now
Yeah.
in New Zealand and thinking, has that, I know that's a big cult that we all know about now, but we didn't at one point,
Yeah.
and people kind of isolated from other people. But if it's in a more mainstream setting, or even if it's the subtleties of something going downhill or towards cultic behavior, I think you're going to have excessive control and there'll be excessive control of people. You're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. A criticism that breaks people's confidence in themselves, so you've got to then become dependent on the leadership. I think always they're going to be creating some atmosphere of fear or even terror. There could be that existential terror that seems like you knew as well, the hell or Armageddon or whatever, or the consequences of non-compliance, will throw you out of the family or you'll lose your job. Serious health issues. I know some cults, some of the wellness cults, some of the things they teach. I mean, there's one group that's active probably worldwide. I think it's pretty active in Australia, but you're not allowed to stir your drink clockwise.
Oh.
Have to stir it anti-clockwise. Otherwise, you're releasing negative energy into the atmosphere. And probably it's what's causing Storm Eowyn, because you stirred the cup the wrong way. And it's creating phobias that are just ridiculous.
Yeah.
This same group says that there's these entities. I remember hearing a talk by the leader saying these entities are they're like things out of Star Wars kind of entities. They're not like, I won't use the word, but like the church talks about certain things, but it's not quite like that. It's more almost like an alien sniffing people on the tube in London. Like, and just creating these serious phobias that people are then terrified, absolutely terrified, because it's created this world in their imagination that just doesn't exist.
But feels like viscerally real, which is that's just like the insane part. Yeah.
But it's created within meetings where there's altered states of consciousness, where people are no longer critically thinking and they're introjecting or swallowing whole these ideas, and they cause havoc in people's lives. Havoc.
Yeah. What are some of the things that people can look out for in terms of, I'm going to throw a question at you that I didn't pre-warn you about, so apologies. But I'm just thinking about, and I want to get to the cult recovery aspect in a sec, but I just want to ask, in terms of practitioners who are not necessarily working in the space of cult recovery or anything like that, but who are therapists, psychologists, social workers in that field, what is your number one suggestion for those people if they have someone sitting in their room and the alarm bells are going off of, holy shit, I think this person might be involved in a cult?
Well, I mean, step back from that. People need to learn about cults, and proper learning, not just the kind of like learning about how to help people, but we'll come to that. I think they need to be very grounded. They need to stay grounded. They need to hold on to this idea. They need to be very careful how they approach it. They need to not become voyeuristic or overly curious and interesting. And they're going to have to go very carefully, because a lot of cultic groups say that, I mean, they're probably lucky to even have that person in the room, because they're often being told that counsellors, police, social workers are part of this evil world system. Systemites, one group calls them. And they need to tread very carefully, and they need to know what resources there are, and potentially hopefully meet with them again, keep this on the back burner and ask very careful questions. And questions that that elicit critical thinking within that person.
Mhm.
Oh, do you think that's normal behavior for someone to be beaten? Or you know, if it was, I don't know, they just have to be very careful, but also keep it in mind. And you don't want that person running. You
Mm,
want to be able to help them,
mm,
but you want to hold in mind, but you need to do your homework. And there's so much, anyway, I'll come to that, but there's so much lack of knowledge
mm,
about what people need when they come out that unfortunately people are aborting therapy.
mm.
They're just not staying because they're saying the therapist just doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah,
The whole time I'm hearing about it all the time.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Now, you have a wonderful book on cult recovery. It's incredible. I think it's probably, it's in a league of its own, to be honest. I haven't found anything else quite like it. And I'm sure that there are a million and one different directions we could go in terms of what cult recovery looks like in, the next 15 minutes of this episode. But one of the biggest things that I find, and I remember thinking it when you were sharing parts of your story, which was, talking about self and things like that. And I find that that's just one of the most fundamental parts of any sort of cult or high control or high demand recovery is who the fuck am I? Right? Like, it's like finding that sense of self and the ability to trust yourself when all of the trust that you've given externally is now in tatters. And so, what I guess have you found helps survivors of cults regain that sense of self and ability to trust themselves as well?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing, and this came through my PhD, is you need to understand the dynamics of the cult.
Yeah.
And that's because, and this is then about who the fuck am I, and the
Hmm.
whole thing about identity is,
Yeah.
I think some people disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think when we're in that setting, we introject those ideas. So say the thing about, sorry, I'm going to use the trigger word again. Say I'm sinful. I'm a terrible, toxic, awful person because I did all these things, and all the religious sort of um, kind of ideas around that. So I take that in, I swallow it whole, and
Mm,
it starts to build a sense of my identity. And the identity I had previously, because I joined, or if you were born into it, any sense of what I love or what I don't love or whatever starts to get swallowed up in this idea that I'm this, just that one part, that's only one piece of a jigsaw of I'm this terrible, sinful person. And so I call that the cultic pseudo identity
mm,
because it's not us, it's not part of us. It's actually it's foreign to us. It's
mm.
an alien, it's alien to us. It's not actually a fundamental part of who I am. Because I'm not like that. I don't see myself like that now. And I didn't before. I probably had some low self-esteem, but it wasn't anything like this.
Yeah.
And so fundamentally, we need to understand what belongs to the cult and the pseudo identity and what belongs to me and my authentic identity.
Yeah.
And in order to get to that, we need to understand the dynamics of the cult, what happened. And that's what Walking Free, my book, is about.
Mm,
It's about the key areas that I've come across. There'll be others.
mm.
That's fine. There's a world of stuff out there. But I tried to I've used this model with clients for 25 years.
Yeah.
So it's been pulled together through the research, through whatever trial and error. What do I think? What don't I think? Is this helpful? Isn't it helpful? And these are the things that went in. There would have been more, but the book got so big that that Routledge said they didn't make me take anything out, but they said you can't put anything else in. It's already a big brick of a book, isn't it?
Yeah.
So honestly, it's quite simple in some ways. You
Mm.
need to understand what happened to you so that you can then start to separate
Mm.
what belonged to the cult identity, to what they told you you had to be, and what belongs to you.
Yeah.
And one of my participants said, we look for the PhD. She said, we look for those kernels, those seeds of what are you? I love art, or I love drawing, or I'm kind, or I'm grumpy, or, this is what I'm like. And these are the things things I like to do, things I'm good at, things I love to do and I'm not good at. I mean, we don't have to be good at everything.
Mm-hmm.
I love doing art, but I never have the time. And, I think I could have been good at it if I put
Yeah.
like you have to work very hard to do it,
Mm.
so there's potentials for us to do things and other things.
Yeah.
So I think, really, really that's the fundamental. And part of that then will be unmasking the cult leaders, seeing whoever the leadership was as a human being, understanding thought reform, being able to set boundaries, but understanding the dynamics of the group.
Yeah.
So that, and I think the quicker somebody gets that help,
Mm.
the quicker they'll recover.
Yeah.
It's not the whole story. Life goes on, shit happens, triggers happen,
Yeah.
but it builds a foundation for being able to go forward. And I learned that through my PhD. It's not something I made up. And I see it a lot. And somebody just got in touch with me. I think she said she left the cult 40 years ago
Oh,
and is seeking help now. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, people in agony for years and years. Whereas if they'd had access to something, and there's a lot more available now than there used to be, then they could have at least started on that road way
yeah.
back.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a great word, but I really love the word that you used there, which is like the agony that they've been in, because I think
Yeah.
that that's exactly what it is. I think a lot of people think that once you leave a space that you should just be able to, you're out of the toxic environment, you're all right now, like you're safe, but actually it's agony.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
agony, and it's way far away from that.
Yeah.
Because we do swallow it. We swallow the stuff they've told us, and it sits like undigested food in our stomach, and
Yeah.
it causes us pain. And we need to be able to chew it over, look at it. And some people have been scared, so scared to go into that process.
Yeah.
But actually, that word, that agony, is actually much greater not doing. It's like lancing the boil. Do you leave the boil, let it get infected, let it then spread, or do you say, okay, I'm going to actually lance it? And I have found that walking free is based on a previous workbook that I've used, and the therapists I've trained have used for some years now. They've used them as well very successfully, and walking free, so they say. But it's not nearly as agonizing as people think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Because working with the psychoeducation, working with learning and using the frontal lobes,
Mm.
like using the left brain, whatever you want to call it, actually understanding it, studying it, and then making the emotional connections
Yeah.
instead of, so the mistake that therapists make is, and that person who's ended up in that social worker's room, you said, and they're going, oh fuck, what am I going to do with this person? They've been in a cult, is to understand actually what you're going to be meeting is the cultic identity, the
Mm.
person they've been told that they are. And you have to be able to work with that, but you have to then be able to help that person to reach and find their authentic identity, the person that they are. But that takes some work
Yeah.
because their phobias, well, my leaders, what the guru, some of the gurus are seen as God. It's not a
Yep.
Christian God, they're seen as a God.
Mm.
So that takes quite some courage to say, actually, this is a load of bollocks.
Yeah.
This is just some abusive old fat bastard who's sitting on a throne,
Yeah. Yep.
milking for all he can,
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. And I mean, I have found both with the clients that I work with and in my own experience of therapy was that I needed that psychoeducation. I needed to put language to the experience. I needed to understand it. And to use the bridge analogy again, the psychoeducation was the bridge that made it okay to start looking at the rest of the stuff. So yeah, I think logically that should make a lot of sense to people. I would
yeah,
hope.
good. But it's
Oh,
great to hear that's what
yeah.
helped you because
Yeah.
we've not met before and
Yeah.
we've not had a conversation before, but that was what helped you. So
Yeah.
that's well encouraging to me, that you came to that same conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually would ask, actually, I'm going to go back a section. I was going to
Yeah,
ask my final question, but I'm going to throw another question at you that I didn't prepare
yeah.
you for.
I don't mind throwing.
This is the I love asking people who work in this space this type of question, which is what has it been like for you personally to help probably countless individuals recover from being a part of a cult? Like not the details of like what the actual recovery process, but the impact on you to be able to be a part of that with those individuals.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 72 and I'm not giving up soon. I love it.
Good.
I love doing the work. I
Yeah.
love, I have a lot of patience and just take time and going through that. So with walking free, okay, that psychological kind of journey, package, road, whatever you want to call it. Um, Going slowly but surely,
Mm.
not expecting anything or any particular outcome, letting that person find their way out, make their connections. And what I find is by the time we've finished that workbook, that they come to a very different place.
Yeah.
And the affiliate therapists who I've trained, who we collaborate together now
Mm.
because I want to give this away. This isn't about me, it's about seeing it what can be useful to
Yeah.
some people. And it's it's fantastic. And also using the psychoeducation for me as a therapist is very grounding.
Mm.
Because if somebody comes into the room and they just start telling you all these horror stories, they're going to leave that session feeling way worse than when they came in. It's not going to help them, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, it might help to tell somebody, but they'll be on the moon with hyper arousal. To
Yeah.
actually be able to steadily tell your story, but through different glasses, through different viewpoints, that you start to tell the story and make sense of it at the same time is grounding. And that's grounding for me because it can be overwhelming hearing some of this stuff. I feel so angry when
Yeah.
I hear it happen. And I let people know as well. They laugh at me now. They're like, okay. And I
And
usually say,
that makes me happy because I'm just like, I'm so angry on your behalf. Like, yeah.
I always start swearing when that
Yeah.
happens. I can find myself saying fuck a lot, when we start talking about the
Yeah.
leader because like, "Argh." But
Mm.
I let people know, or just, oh God, how ridiculous is that?
Yeah.
How ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Some of the bollocks they talk about.
Yeah.
And it's necessary to disarm that. And who's going to do it? Like they're with us in therapy, we do it, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I think it also just like, I mean, we know that the relationship is, the core factor of any sort of therapy model and approach. And I think if someone was to sit there stone cold face, no reaction in hearing some of these things, that would be so disorienting and traumatizing for the other person. So yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
have to say, absolutely
Yeah.
yes. And
I'd be
it's dangerous.
mortified if that was me.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
I would too. Get me
Yeah.
out of it. Also, it's dangerous for the
Yes.
therapist
Yeah.
because they're inviting transference. So people who aren't therapists may not understand the language, but actually that's what it's about.
Yeah.
And if you invite transference of a rage towards a highly abusive
Mm,
cult leader or figure, then you're in trouble.
yeah.
I think in the therapy, we need to be very person-centered, very unconditional positive regard, non-judgmental. We need to be very present and very interactive.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what I,
Yeah.
yeah.
I usually finish, most of my listeners will know that I usually finish my storytelling episodes with asking the person for some encouragement. And so I twist it for my bonus episodes. So I want to ask you for a word, a message, a piece of advice or encouragement for someone who is in the early stages of their own cult recovery.
The recovery is possible.
Mm,
It really, look, when I left the group,
yeah.
I was nothing like I am now. And okay, it's a very, very long time ago, and I've spent a lot of time recovering,
Mm,
but it's worth putting in the effort,
mm,
and it is possible.
yeah.
And just have have that in mind and get help from people who know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there aren't that many around, but
Yeah.
there are some. And the people I've trained, I'm going to do another certificate
Mm,
training for therapists. There's a lot of interest, so I'm still grappling with how to do that.
yeah.
But it's about finding the right way. And I hope my book, Walking Free, it is a workbook, so I hope that can be a beginning for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes it is coming back to the basics, and people just need to hear from somebody who has done it themselves, but also works in the space. Like you have both of those perspectives to just give that reminder that yes, it's going to be bloody hard, but it's possible. And I think people just need sometimes to hear the basics of healing and recovery is possible. So I love that.
Maybe it's not going to be as awful as you think,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
as one might think.
Yeah.
Because if you have a good therapeutic relationship and
Yeah.
then you have psychoeducational information, then it's a good base to start to really move forward in your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I will pop all of the details for people to be able to access the resources and your book and all of that in the show notes. But I want to thank you so much, both for joining me, but also for the work that you do in this space. I'm very appreciative as a survivor and as a practitioner for the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me. I've loved this conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beyond the Surface. I hope you found today's conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from these stories. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and more content. I love connecting with all of you. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, you're not alone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep moving forward. Take care.